In programming, if you want to execute some instructions repeatedly, you will need to use loop to specify iteration. In this particular example, we will need two components in the designer view. One is a button, so I need to drag a button into the designer view and rename the button as calculate. We will also need a notifier component as an invisible component in the designer view. These are all the blocks that you will need for this particular example. In this example, you will need to create two variables. One is the power counter, another one is result, to store the results of the calculation. As mentioned before, a variable is just a container in the main memory for a program to store data. In this example, we will need to create two containers. One is the power counter, another one is result, to store the results of the calculation. Then when we run the program, we are going to initialize the two variables by putting the value 0 in the power counter container and the value 1 in the result container. Then we'll use this what we call while loop to execute these two instructions repeatedly whenever this statement is evaluated to true, and we can get the while loop from the control block list. During the first iteration, we're going to get the value stored in the power counter container, which is 0. And obviously 0 is less than 3, so we're going to go ahead and execute these two instructions. For the first instruction, we are going to get the value stored in the result container, which is 1, and we're going to multiply it by 2. And then we are going to store the result, which is 2, back into the result container. And then we are going to get the value stored in the power counter container, which is 0. We're going to increment it by 1, so the result will be 1. And we are going to store the result 1 back to the power counter container. After the first iteration, power counter will contain a value of 1 and result will contain a value of 2. Then we'll go ahead and execute the second iteration. For the second iteration, we try to get the value stored in power counter, which is 1, and obviously 1 is less than 3. So we are going to go ahead and execute these two instructions, and we are going to double the value of result and increment power counter by 1 again. After the second iteration, power counter will become 2 and result will become 4. Then we are going to go ahead and execute the third iteration by getting the value stored in the power counter, which is 2, and obviously 2 is less than 3. So we're going to go ahead and execute these two instructions, and we are going to double the value stored in result and increment power counter by 1 again. After the third iteration, power counter will become 3 and result will become 8. Now we'll go ahead and trigger the fourth iteration by getting the value stored in power counter, which is 3. And obviously 3 equals to 3, but not less than 3. So this statement will evaluate to false. Since this is false, we'll exit this while loop and we will stop repeating these two instructions. For this particular while loop, we multiply the value 2 to the result container 3 times. So that means that we are actually calculating 2 to the power 3. After we exit this while loop, we'll use this notifier block to show the calculation result, which is 2 to the power 3. Okay, now let's try out this example on the deemulator. If we click on this button, we'll use a while loop to calculate 2 to the power 3, and we'll use a pop-up dialog to show the result, which is 8.